good, y'all? It's the one and only King Cal 516 live in the mix, and this is the Swiss Flames podcast. So Patrick Beverley this weekend had a return to the Staples Center. If we recall, this past offseason, the LA Clippers traded Patrick Beverley to the Memphis Grizzlies, and then the Memphis Grizzlies, in the same offseason, trade him to the Minnesota Timberwolves. So the Timberwolves visited the Staples Center to go against the Clippers this weekend and got demolished, by the way. The Clippers demolished them. But during the game, the Clippers had a tribute to Patrick Beverley. He was a part of that crew of guys that came in, a part of that Chris Paul trade back in 2017. He became a part of a Clippers team that became a hard-nosed team, a blue-collar team after, they basically were destroying the Lob City version of the Clippers. And it became this blue hard hat wearing team that Patrick Beverley was a part of. And it just seemed like every year in those 4 years Patrick Beverley was a Clipper, they elevated to the point where last season they got to the conference finals. So Patrick Beverley had some comments about his return that I'm going to address and get into, which is basically why, basically what we want to get into today. Before we do that, I just want to remind you guys, please check out our website, www.swissflames.com. Hit us up on Twitter at SwissFlames. Check out the Facebook, YouTube page at Swiss Flames Podcast. Hit the like, hit the subscribe to support the channel. And definitely hit the notification tab just so you can stay on top of everything Swiss Flames Podcast. With that out the way, I want to read this quote from Patrick Beverley and then dive into it. And I quote, "I got no regrets, wouldn't change anything. We put on for the city. We turned this Lakers city into a Clipper city. That's all you can ask for. We gave the fans something to be excited about." Now, I agree with Patrick Beverley for most of the statement, except one line in the statement. Right? Because part of it, and I take nothing from the statement because it's just his opinion. But there's a key thing he said in there that throws it off for me. And I'm like, yeah, I don't agree with that. So, to break that down, I'll read it one more time. I got no regrets. Wouldn't change anything. So far, in that part, that's his personal opinion. That it is what it is, because that's what he believes. So he can't really knock that. We put on for the city. He's absolutely right. Like, every year it just seemed like the Clippers got better. They had a hard-nosed fought team. They fought hard. They overachieved that year, even though they lost in the first round to a Kevin Durant-led Golden State Warrior team. You know what I'm saying? They didn't have a dominating superstar, to the fact that, a guy like Kawhi Leonard could look at the Clippers and say, hey, yeah, adding me and one other person to this team, we might got something going on here, right? And then it ends up leading them to a conference final last season where some say, well, if Kawhi didn't get hurt, you probably win a championship. Possible. That's definitely something that's possible. So, from that standpoint, hey, I still agree with them. They definitely put on for the city. But here's the line where he lost me. We turned this Lakers city into a Clipper city. He lost me there, right? All right, and then to finish out the statement, that's all you can ask for. We gave the fans something to be excited about. Now, I agree with that statement, because I do believe that Clippers team gave the city something to be excited about. Right? Because right now, the way the Clippers are set up, for the next few years, they're going to be relevant. They're going to be contenders the next few years. You look at them, even though the Clippers, they just had they demolished the Timberwolves this weekend, but they lost yesterday to the Bulls. And so their 7-game win streak was snapped. But they had a rocky start to the season, and now they're rolling. And they're a good team even without Kawhi. It's just that they need Kawhi to put them over the top to truly be title contenders. But they're good enough to be a playoff team even without Kawhi Leonard. And they're starting to show that to you. Paul George playing out of his mind. So I believe the Clippers are a team, and I believe during Patrick Beverley's run, they were a team that gave the city something to be excited about. But you gotta, to me, I just disagree when you hear the statement, we turn this Lakers city into a Clipper city. I do not believe LA is a Clipper city by no stretch of the imagination. Even when you watch those two different games, when you watch a Laker game compared to a Clipper game, the energy is just totally different. And we gotta remember, winning creates fandom. And so when you talk about the Lakers, you're talking about a global phenomenon. The Lakers, to me, are the most popular NBA team around the world. Now, I always throw people off when I say the New York Knicks are valued at the highest of all the teams, but the Lakers are the most popular team. So the Lakers usually finish number 2, number 3, usually as far as just what they're worth, right? And remember, it always surprises people when I say, the Knicks are the valued at the most, and they usually are valued at the most. And you got to always remember, think about all those seasons the New York Knicks were losing and weren't really relevant and were the laughing stock, right? They're having success now, and the NBA's happy because you want that New York market to be successful. That's a big market for the NBA. So having the Knicks relevant and having the Knicks doing good helps the NBA, right? Even when the Knicks were losing consistently, they were still selling out the Garden. We ain't going to get too much into that, but basketball is the number one sport in New York. To me, basketball has always been number one. Baseball is big, football is big, but basketball to me is the number one sport. That's why in New York you always see that the top recruits in basketball, one of the places they come out of is New York. You know what I mean? In the South, you see how the community all rallies behind football. To me, it's similar to in New York, the whole city rallies around these basketball. I just feel like basketball's number one in New York. And that's part of the why you see such a fandom when it comes to the New York Knicks. And as star-driven as the Nets have, as the bigger stars, the fandom of the New York Knicks is still bigger. And you can see that. You go to a Knicks game compared to a Barclays game, there's a big difference. The Barclays is the shiny new arena. They got 3 mega stars. Yet, I still think New York City is still more excited about the Knicks, who can't compete with that kind of star power. I grew up a Mets fan. And if you look at it, no matter any year the Mets have had success, deep down, I know that there are more Yankees fans than Knicks fans because the Yankees have won way more than the Mets. And they have a longer history of winning in the city. And some of this gets passed down from generation to generation. There's a lot of kids that grow up in a home where their parents are a Yankees fan, their parents are a Mets fan, and they just inherit that. I can only imagine the same thing goes on in LA. You got the parents who are Lakers fans. They go to a game with their kids. What they do? They're dressing their kids up in Lakers gear. They're basically grooming their kids to continue being a fan of what they are fans of. And so the Lakers are tied with the Boston Celtics for 18 championships, the most in NBA history. Clippers have 0 championships. It's going to take more than a conference final, making one conference final, to overcome that. And it's going to take years and years and years of successful winning and years and years and years of the Lakers not achieving greater heights than you for you to even be considered to even make a dent in that Lakers fan base, to turn that more into a Clipper fan base. And so they are not there yet, and that's the honest truth. But it's not a knock, because I do believe Patrick Beverley in his 4 years had a good 4-year run as a Clipper. But I firmly believe that it ain't Clipper City. It's a Lakers city. And I think most of the world could look at Los Angeles and tell you that, even if they don't live there. Just like most of the world could look at New York and tell you that it's a Yankee city more than a Mets city. It's a New York Knicks city more than a Brooklyn Nets city. You ain't got to be a rocket scientist to see that. You could just watch the games and you could tell just from the vibe, the atmosphere. Anyhow, let me know what you think about these Pat Beverley comments. Do you agree or disagree? Hit me up in the comments. Let me know. It's your boy King Cal 516 signing off. This has been the Switch Flame Podcast, y'all.